Here's the contents of the video, so you can click on a portion or let the video run. Here are the performance notes for the La-5 Series 8, which you can pause and take a moment to look at. Here we are in the La-5 cockpit, so we'll start on the left hand side and work our way around as usual. First we have the aileron trim. You can trim to the left and then trim to the right. There we can put the supercharger in second gear, pulling it back its first gear. Then we have the oil radiator, pushing it forward opens the radiator and pulling it back closes it. There's elevator trim, so rolling forward is nose down and rolling back is nose up. There's rudder trim to the left and rudder trim to the right. Moving up to the top of the screen we have the mixture. Pulling back makes the mixture rich and pushing forward makes the mixture lean. Under that is the throttle. Pushing forward increases manifold pressure and pulling back decreases manifold pressure. Then there's RPM control. Pushing forward increases RPM and pulling back decreases RPM. Now we'll start covering the main panel. So here you can see the flaps controls and the flaps indicator. And we can move the flaps up and down to see how the indicator moves. Small button here for engine boost on and off. Then we have the landing gear indicators. Green is down and locked, blank is transition, and red is up and locked. Now looking upwards here, we have the clock. Then we have the fuel gauge measured in litres. Then there's the airspeed indicator in kilometres per hour. Then an altimeter in metres and kilometres. A compass. Then there's the turn and bank indicator. And moving over to the right a little bit, you can see the tachometer. Under that we have the manifold pressure. Then there's the vertical speed indicator. Then we have our split gauge of oil temp, oil pressure and fuel pressure. And lastly we have cylinder head temperature, which is largely affected by your mixture and cowling flap setting. Now we can shift our view to the lighting panels. Here we have the instrument and the cockpit lighting. And this small switch is the nav lights. Turns the lights on the wings that are red and green. Then we have our landing lights. And lastly, we're going to be looking at the cowling flaps on the La-5. Rolling the wheel forward opens the cowling flaps and pulling it back closes them. In general, you're going to have the cowling flaps fully open or closed depending on the cooling you want. Just bear in mind that in the open position there's a lot of drag from the flaps. Now that we've gone through the aircraft cockpit, we'll look at how to start up the La-5. So first off, make the mixture fully rich. You pull that down, then we can inch the throttle forward slightly, and then we push the RPM control all the way forward. The oil radiator will be closed, and we also ensure that the cowling flaps are closed. Then once we're ready we press E and we'll start the engine. As usual though, now that the engine's started, I'll be skipping the taxi sequence and going straight to the takeoff. Alright, on the runway, ready to take off. First thing we do is close the canopy. Then we'll go through the rest of the checklist. Mixture should be fully rich. RPM control is fully forward. We'll extend the flaps to 20 degrees. Oil rad is already open, so we make sure the cowling flaps are open. There they are. Then we're going to increase the throttle gradually. We're going to rotate at about 180 kilometers an hour. And once we hit 250, we'll retract the gear and flaps. Alright, so we're going to be applying some power. The nose is going to want to pull to the right, so we're going to be using left rudder to counter that on takeoff. I'm going to push the stick forward and get the tail wheel off the ground and build up more airspeed. And then we'll rotate at 180 kilometers per hour. The airspeed's up, so we retract the gear and the flaps. Then we lean out the mixture and then go through the landing checklist. When landing the La-5, I use 220 km per hour on downwind. We'll have the gear down, cowling flaps will be closed. We'll also drop the flaps down by about 10 degrees so we don't have such a nose high attitude. Then I'll turn on the circular base and final, and the runway is 45 degrees between the wing and the tail. I'll then drop the flaps down to 30 degrees and begin descending at 150 meters a minute. Then once we're on final, we deploy the flaps fully, and we'll start the approach at about 200 to 210 kilometers per hour. We'll aim to touch down at about 170. So now that I'm travelling on downwind, I'm going to drop the gear down. This is let me bleed off any extra airspeed. And once I get below 250 kilometers per hour, I'll drop the flaps by 10 degrees. Now I just want to manage my pitch and throttle to maintain altitude and airspeed at 220 kilometers per hour. Quick check of the runway position, make sure it's in the right spot. So now we're coming up to being a beam of the runway on downwind, so we're going to get ready to drop our flaps to 30 degrees once that happens. So flaps are down to 30 degrees. Now we're going to look for the runway position and see if it's at 45 degrees. Have a quick check. Okay, that looks good. So now we'll turn onto our circular base and final, and we'll begin our descent. And we'll maintain this turn all the way until final approach, at which point we'll extend the flaps fully. Alright, so we're coming around now. We'll roll the wings level and extend the flaps fully. And now we're going to be adjusting our pitch and throttle to make sure we can keep our airspeed between 2 to 210 kilometers per hour on final. So I've picked my landing point. I'm trying to keep that about where the crosshair is. And I make tiny adjustments in the throttle and pitch attitude to make sure it stays in that position. Now crossing over the runway threshold, we'll flatten it out and begin to flare. You can cut the throttle to idle, and we can put it into the 3-point position and touch down. Then once you're on the ground, apply full back pressure, retract the flaps, and apply brakes to help yourself slow down. That was the familiarization video for the La-5. If you enjoyed the video and you want to see more, let me know in the comments below and hit subscribe in the top left corner.